In our last couple of videos in this self-awareness series, we've talked about knowing what you want most and knowing what you want now as helpful ways to increase your self-awareness that will create great conversations and lead to deep connection. But if you want to truly know yourself for who you are and to be connected and loved at the deepest levels, there is one more area where you need to know what you want, and I'll warn you now, it's not as fun. Hi everybody, I'm Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And one of the most important tasks for becoming a healthy adult who can love well and build satisfying relationships is the task of becoming integrated. When we are integrated, our pictures of ourselves, our self-awareness, includes everything that is true about us. So it includes not just the good, not just the parts of ourselves that make me look good or make me feel good. And so, besides knowing what you want most in life and what you want now in life, if you want to become integrated and have a true, complete, well-rounded picture of yourself, it's also important to know what you want that you don't want to want, right? What do you want and you really want it, but it transgresses your values? What do you want and you really want it, but it's harmful to your relationships with God and with others and with yourselves? Jesus talked about the importance of noticing the log in your own eye. He had a high value for an honest self-awareness that leads to an integrated picture of ourselves, of who we really are, both the good parts and the bad parts. And so just as we brainstormed what we want most in life and what we want now in life, it's also important to brainstorm what is it that you want, that you really want and you consistently want, but you don't want to want it because it transgresses your values and harms your relationships. For example, perhaps what you want is to avoid conflict whenever possible. Conflict comes, you just want to run the other way. Perhaps you want to engage in destructive behavior. Maybe there's a little habit that you have and, not full on, but you want to engage in a little bit. And you also want to lie about the fact that you're engaging in that behavior. Perhaps you want a reputation that you haven't earned. Perhaps you want to tell people just enough of the truth to get them to do what you want, because what you really want is to manipulate people. Perhaps what you want to do is avoid or ignore this one specific responsibility that you have in life. Perhaps you want to keep making the same choices and hope for different results. Doesn't work very well, but a lot of times that's exactly what we want. I just want to make the same choices and somehow have it end up differently. Sometimes we want bad things to happen to a person who's harmed us. Sometimes we want bad things to happen to a person just because they disagree with us. Sometimes we want to not take responsibility for our lives. Sometimes we want to be seen as weak and as victims so that we don't have to take responsibility for our lives. Sometimes we want to always be seen as good or always be seen as smart, always strong, always noble, always humble, always spiritual, whatever's most important. I always want to be seen as this, and I never want to be seen as the opposite of that. There are a lot of things that we want, and it's very challenging to admit to ourselves that we want them. And I really encourage you to spend some time brainstorming and capturing some of those things. Because these things that we want, that we don't want to want, when we're not aware of them, they're much more powerful. And in fact, if we're not aware of them, and sometimes even when we are aware of them, but especially when we're not aware of them, they are more powerful than what you want most and what you want now. And so if we haven't surfaced them, they're actually one of the biggest obstacles to getting what we want most out of life. And here's why it is critical for you to know what you want that you don't want to want. Here's why it's so important to surface those things, to face them head on and admit it to yourself, because it's going to give you an opportunity to be truly known and to experience life-changing relationships that are not possible unless you do this. Because here's the problem when we lack this integrated self-awareness of who we are, is that my self-image then, when I'm not integrated, when I'm only admitting the good parts, my self-image is really a mask that I send out into the world to get people to love me. I think this is my best shot. If I present all this good stuff, people are going to love me. But on a deeper level, I understand that it's really not me that they love, it's my mask. And on a deeper level, I really know that my mask and I are different things. And so there's this nagging doubt in the back of my mind. If they knew the real me, would they love me as much as they love this mask? And that nagging doubt can keep us from experiencing and knowing and metabolizing the real love that people want to give to us. So we really need, instead of sending a mask out that gets our love and affection, we need for our real selves to show up, our real, complete, integrated self to show up in relationships, to receive love that we can actually experience. But there's a bit of a paradox that's really helpful to understand when we're trying to do this. As we've been talking about self-disclosure, we have been talking about this continuum where relationships begin with low trust, and so lower risk is appropriate. And over time, what we want to do is go from that kind of shallow end of the pool up to the deeper end of the pool into relationships that are much higher trust, and so we can disclose much riskier things. So here's the paradox with this, is that when we discover things about ourselves that are unsavory or dark or things that we don't like, we really need high trust relationships in order to share those things. I'm not going to share those with a stranger that I just met. I want to share those with people that I can trust. On the other hand, the paradox is, the flip side is, I also need high trust people in order to discover the dark things about myself that I don't like. Why is that? Well, it's because there is a severe psychological risk to admitting to myself that there's something about myself that is really unsavory, that's really dark, that I don't like, that I wish wasn't true. And I think it's helpful to picture this risk as like learning to walk on a high wire, right? That's a pretty high risk activity. Now imagine the difference between learning to walk on a high wire when you have a net below you that'll catch you if you fall, and learning to walk on a high wire when there is no net. And so this could actually ruin you to try to do this. Well, the net, when we're trying to integrate ourselves and admit to ourselves some of the darker things, some of the things about ourselves we wish weren't true, the net is high trust relationships where no matter what I discover about myself, I know I won't be abandoned, and I know that I'll still be loved. Sometimes when we see someone who is in denial about an obvious behavior that's destructive to them, it's easy for us to think that they're lying to us about that. And the reality is they're not lying to us, they're lying to themselves. It's not a truth they're hiding from us, it's a truth they're hiding from themselves, because the risk of being honest about this is everything I'm worth. The risk is I'm no longer lovable. The risk is everyone will abandon me. In fact, I will abandon myself. We need a safety net to come out of denial. And so for you and I, for the things that we are in denial about, that is hard for us to admit to ourselves, What we need is a safety net. We need high trust relationships where it's safe to explore. What are some of the things about me that I may not like at all? I have a support group of men that meets every other week, and one of our sayings is, all of you is welcome here. So no matter what you discover tonight, no matter what comes out, everything is welcome here. We'll unpack it together. We'll see what it means together. You will not be abandoned. You will not be shamed. You will not be rejected. And that's the kind of safety net we need in order to discover the things about ourselves that we wish were not true. And here's what happens when in those high trust relationships, we find the safety to discover all the parts of ourselves, not just the good parts, but also the bad parts and the weak parts and the broken parts and the dark parts, right? When we have that, then we actually take that integrated person with us into every relationship. And so we're the same person in high trust relationships as we are in relationships with the people that we've just met. I don't need to impress anybody that I've just met. I don't have to try to woo them. I know who I am, and I have a safety net about that, and that allows me to be free just to enjoy people when I meet them. And whether or not I disclose something or not has nothing to do with whether or not I'm hiding. It has to do with, is this the healthy thing to build this relationship right now? Is it appropriate for the trust level of the relationship? And would it be helpful for this person that I'm talking to? So let me give you 3 simple steps you can practice. The first step is to ask yourself, what does my safety net look like right now? If I try to be honest with myself, what is the price I'm going to pay for that? And so your first step may be you need to build a safety net. Now, maybe in your life there's no one around to be a safety net for you. And in that case, I would recommend that you seek out a more structured environment to be your safety net. So you may get a therapist to talk about some of these things. You may join a support group or a recovery group where there's a lot of structure and where people regularly unpack and admit the unsavory part of themselves, and just be a part of that group and witness other people doing it for a while and allow that to become your safety net until you can do it yourself. The second step is to brainstorm. What are some things that I honestly want, and I want them on a regular basis, and I don't want to want them? I'm not proud of wanting them. They betray a brokenness or a shallowness or a selfishness in me, but I really do want them. Brainstorm that, get it down on paper so you can stare it in the eyes and face it. And the third step is to share some of those things in our high trust relationships. And I would include in that sharing some of those things with God. Jesus knows that you have a log in your own eye. It's not going to be a surprise to him. In 1 John, we read that if we claim to be without sin, we are liars and his truth is not in us. But if we confess our sins, he's faithful and righteous to forgive us. And what that says is God is inviting you into a relationship where all of you is welcome, right? Where you don't have to pretend. You don't have to be better than you are. He is able to accept and tolerate and unpack and work with who you really are today. So begin sharing that with God as well. So ask yourself, how strong is my safety net? Brainstorm the things that you want that you really don't want to want, and begin sharing some of those things with your high trust relationship so that you can be deeply connected and deeply known. Simple steps, practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.